Now, moving forward and keeping the momentum going on, I would like to invite and welcome Miss Medha Gupta, who is the Associate Editor at HarperCollins Publishers. And she has an experience of over 15 years in publishing and journalism, and she has also worked with Times of India. To please step in as our next moderator, and I request you to please initiate the second panel discussion on the role of technology in education CSR in COVID times. Thank you, Medha. Over to you.
Thank you, Ruchika, for that wonderful introduction. All right, a warm welcome to all the speakers and viewers. I am Medha Gupta. Thank you so much for joining us on the wonderful occasion of Ganesh Chaturthi and making time on a holiday to discuss a very pertinent topic in a post-COVID world. We will be discussing the role of technology in education, CSR in COVID times, futuristic solutions and roadmap. As we all know, the last 2 years have been the largest disruption to education in history. As per a report by the Azim Premji University, as many as 92% of children on an average have lost at least one specific language ability from the previous year across all classes. A staggering 82% of children on an average have lost at least one specific mathematical ability from the previous year across all classes again. So to deal with this crisis, stakeholders in the social sector have devised several programs to help students with limited resources to continue their education. Many corporates use technology in a big way and came up with innovative programs to support and counsel students virtually. As a publishing professional working in the children's space, I have seen how moving to digital content has been a bane and a boon of sorts, especially during the post-pandemic world. So let's discuss this, and let me first, we have a wonderful bunch of speakers with us to enrich us with their thoughts. Let me first introduce them. We have Dr. Rishikesha T Krishnan, Director, IIM Bangalore. Professor Krishnan's main areas of interest are strategy and innovation. He has been a visiting scholar at the Center for Advanced Studies of India and University of Pennsylvania, as well as at the Indian School of Business. In the past,
Medha, don't worry too much. I think that's fine. That's good enough. Yeah, school, just school. Yeah.
All right, then I'll move to Dr. Himanshu Rai, Director, IIM Indore. Prior to this, he has been a professor at IIM Lucknow. He has also been the Dean of MISD Bocconi in Milan, Italy.
And coincidentally, both were colleagues also at IIM Indore. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Then
Dr. Himanshu Rai and Dr. Krishnan is the part of our eminent jury panel, which selected the social initiatives, great social initiatives for the CSR awards. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Thanks, Somesh. Then the third person we have with us is Mr. Sanjay Sinha, who's the Managing Director of Microcredits Ratings International Limited.
Sanjay Sinha is taking time to join, so we can start with Dr. Rai and Dr. Krishnan. Yeah.
All right, and we are yet to be joined by Somadat Chatterjee also, I believe.
Yes. So we can start. We can start.
All right, let's get started then. Okay, so let me get started by asking how technology has created futuristic solutions. But before that, I would like to start with Mr. Krishnan and have his observations on the COVID crisis in education sector. If you would like to share with us what has been the biggest challenges and where does he feel that, best solutions were, found. And so, Mr. Krishnan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Medha. Good afternoon, and thanks for inviting me to this panel. I think when you look at the whole process of learning, one part of learning is, of course, just about content. And content can often be communicated in other modes, maybe digitally. But learning is much more than just imbibing content, the whole social aspect of learning. where students learn from each other, students learn by doing, students learn through projects. I mean, there are a lot of other ways in which students learn apart from just imbibing content. So I think what we've seen during pandemic is that some of us, at least the more privileged part of the Indian education system, we were able to quickly shift the mode of content transmission to online. And I think most of us have done it quite successfully, with maybe some hiccups in the beginning, but subsequently we have managed quite well. But there are other parts of the learning process which perhaps are getting missed out. Of course, this year is a little better because we actually have some classes running, even if it's in a hybrid mode. But I think there's a whole section of the Indian education system, a much larger section, which is left out of even the content part. And I think there's significant challenges for that part. So I think that's the core of the story so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Krishnan, on those wonderful thoughts. Then we could maybe ask Mr. Rai to add to this.
Yeah, certainly, Medha. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me here. I'll just add on to what Rishi said. So, you have to look at this impact of COVID from two perspectives. One is the perspective of the educational institution, so say the IIMs, or IIM Indore in particular, that I would talk about. And the second is the perspective of the students. So when you talk about the perspective of the students, like Rishi said, the social aspect that comes through socializing processes, through the festivals that they conduct, through the interactions that they have when they come and live in the hostels, through those little decisions that they make when they're actually living independently away from the house of their parents, even those little decisions that they need to make in their day-to-day lives. Now, all of those, the students were missing out on. But very importantly, there was another element, and that was this concept of collective anxiety. So with some of my faculty colleagues, we did a research, and what we found out was that the number of internal conflicts amongst the students, and this is not just about the IIM Indore students or the management students or only the higher education institution students, but students across the world, the number of internal conflicts were increasing. There was something, a phenomenon called collective anxiety, which was coming in, and that needed to be addressed. So we obviously needed to spruce up. Now, like Rishi said, we happen to be a privileged lot that we have the wherewithal and the resources to actually do things. And therefore, we increased the number of counselors. We chose some online counselors, so on and so forth, and provided an avenue for our students to actually talk to somebody. But what about those numerous students whose institutions or families could not afford to do so? So that was one element that we at IIM Indore tried to look at. Now, coming from the institutional perspective, I still very distinctly remember that blessed day, 18th of March, 2020, when I called an emergency meeting of the academic council and asked the students to return home. Within a week, we managed to go online. But what we did not realize in the initial days was that while we managed to go online in terms of imparting some of the classes in the online mode, what we did not realize was that many of our students did not have access. They did not have access to bandwidth. They did not have access to equipment. Some of them did not have homes which were big enough because the parents were working from home. They had other siblings who were using the same equipment or the same space. And therefore, there was another element. And to me, that was one big learning experience. And the third element from the institutional perspective, obviously, was that of administration. So we have a beautiful 193-acre campus. Now, it's beautiful when everything is hunky-dory. It's amazing when you have the entire support staff in. But when the lockdown happened, we had only 10% of the support staff inside the campus. So with 10% of the support staff, to maintain a 193-acre campus, including those things like housekeeping, gardening, security, etc., that was a huge challenge. So there were these three big buckets of challenges that we faced so far as the COVID is concerned. Back to you, Medha.
Thank you, Mr.
Can I
Rai.
ask a question, Medha?
Sure, Sumesh. Go ahead.
So, sir, I have been coordinating with you both, and you are the guiding light of academic culture in management education, and broadly speaking, the broad academic research and whatever the way education is going. So, sir, during the COVID times, government allowed research and development in health sector, but that was confined to health sector. How important it was for education sector to have such kind of research and development flexibility from CSR side, so that there could have been some models which could be helpful for students, children, and maybe long-lasting, could provide long-lasting solutions also.
So, Rishi, shall I take it first?
Yeah.
Okay.
This question to you both, sir. We wanted perspective from you both.
So since I'm on the unmute, I'll take it first before passing the ball to Rishi. Yes. So you're right, Somesh, that the government came up with a lot of support so far as the health sector was concerned, including research. But I think all of us, I'm sure Rishi will talk about the wonderful research that they have done at IIM Bangalore, but I'll talk about IIM Indore. So the first thing that we did was we have this concept of seed money, where we provide seed money to all our faculty, whoever wants to do research. And there are no questions asked, you just have to define a research problem, and then you get a certain seed money. There is a certain cap to the number of seed money projects that a faculty can have. But the moment COVID kicked in, we said we are going to have a special fund for COVID-related research. And therefore, anybody who wants to start a research on COVID-related issues can do so immediately. So for example, one of my colleagues, along with his friends at the University of Michigan, initially actually made some predictive modeling. He made a predictive model in the first wave, where they predicted the number of beds that would be required, the number of ventilators that would be required, the number of people who would actually contract COVID. And subsequently, I think the other organizations started joining in. So for example, FICCI came to us, and then FICCI and with Apollo Group, we created an unlockdown strategy for the state of Madhya Pradesh. Subsequently, GIZ came in, and GIZ gave us a certain research grant to actually look at India after COVID. So currently we are working on 4 research projects, we are working on 2 books, and we are working on 2 case studies where we would be looking at India after COVID, including specific sectors as to how will the steel industry look like, how would the health insurance industry look like, how would the hospitals look like in the post-COVID era, and what do they need to do, and what does the government need to do to ensure that these are strengthened. So I think this was a time when organizations, government, and academia came together to address this challenge, and not just from an educational point of view, not just to make sure that education is being imparted, but the larger challenge of how should we actually prepare our country to take this weird pandemic that we are currently facing. Right. Over to you, Rishi.
Yeah, so I think Himanshu has outlined things quite well. I just add maybe a couple of small points. Fortunately, most of our large institutions are campus-based. So to that extent, the campuses have continued to function during the pandemic in spite of the challenges that Himanshu mentioned. So I don't think we actually stopped our research activities at all during the pandemic. Like was mentioned just now, there was some reorientation for sure. Faculty did try to spend part of their time at least on COVID-related issues, whether it be modeling, whether it be supply chain, whether it be work from home issues. I mean, the whole gamut of possible research issues. But I think we were fortunate that we were able to make that transition quite quickly, largely because all our activities are based on campus, and a good number in our case, maybe about 70–80% of faculty anyway stay on campus. So we really weren't too, sort of affected as far as our research activities are concerned.
So my question was, sir, again pointed to corporate support towards educational research, academic research that was there in the health sector, but not in education sector. Do you think that government should be making such policies where in education sector is also supported with research and development funds that can be also included in the CSR spend of the corporates?
Yes, I think in general, the answer is yes. But to be honest, a lot of the research we do does not involve such resources as you would involve in the health sector. For example, if you're developing a vaccine and taking it to market, or developing a diagnostic test and taking it to market, the kind of costs involved are quite different from the kind of research we do in education. So to be fair, I think there's a priority. It's probably in the health sector. There could be exceptions, of course. I mean, for example, if you're doing some really important research with respect to how you can provide school education remotely in an environment with absence of devices, bandwidth, etc. By all means, I think the government should jump into supporting that. But I'm not so sure that Himanshu and I need too much support for that.
Right. Great. So, Ms. Medha, Mr. Sanjay Sinha is also there.
Sure. Yeah, I just saw that. Welcome, Mr. Sinha. I'll briefly introduce him. He's the managing director of M-CRIL. He has knowledge and experience of over 24 countries and over 35 years of economic and development research experience. And Mr. Sinha, we were just discussing.
It's the midnight where he is sitting. So it's midnight, and we should be very, yeah, he's in USA right now.
Okay,
actually, it's not midnight. It's midday. I'm in the UK.
Okay, Somesh.
Okay.
He's in the UK.
All right, then I think good evening would just work fine.
Yeah.
Mr. Sinha, I was about to actually ask you that we were in the middle of a discussion where we were basically discussing the challenges that the education industry has been facing in light of the post-pandemic world. And we just had some wonderful thoughts from Mr. Krishnan and Mr. Rai. Would you like to add to the challenges, and would you like to throw some light on that and how the corporate sector dealt with it?
Well, the question that was put to me was a little wider than just the corporate sector. It's stakeholders generally. I think
Yeah, right, sir.
It's a useful question to address. I have to say that looking at the projects that were shared to me, with me, I was very impressed by the response of the Himachal Pradesh government to this COVID.
Right, sir.
I'm just opening the appropriate file. The Har Ghar Pathshala program that the Himachal government launched, apparently very, very quickly, was a remarkable response to COVID. And I think, if everybody could get geared quite as fast as this, within 1 week of lockdown, I'm sure there were glitches in implementation initially, but its conceptualization at such high speed, content being disseminated to students through WhatsApp, more than 70% of students being reached every day, teacher engagement. One of the issues with the information that's been provided here, of course, is that we don't have a lot of independent feedback. But this type of response, I think if every state government had been able to do this, would be quite, it's quite remarkable. Similarly, Pratham's program, the NGO engagement there, also very good, developing content which could be shared on WhatsApp with students, and then follow up by volunteers. These are, excellent ways of making sure that the adverse effects of lockdowns and so on are kept minimized. So please tell me, have I answered your question, or
so,
you...
sir, just wanted to ask you, during the, education sector is given the highest priority in terms of how corporates spend their CSR money. So around 30 to 35, 40% money goes to education. It's a significant amount. Do you think that over the last 1.5 years since the COVID outbreak, that kind of money that was going to education sector was utilized in a rightful manner, because the existing program that were running in the offline mode had to be suddenly changed into online mode? So do you think that that was properly utilized, or corporates needed more innovative ways to implement in sync with the COVID protocols?
Well, the problem, of course, was the suddenness of the lockdown. Over time, everybody has adjusted to it. I think the experience has been salutary for everyone involved in the CSR field. That's why I was emphasizing the Himachal government's program, because from all indications, it seems to have been launched within 1 week of the lockdown, which I think is quite remarkable. But over time, I think other institutions, other people involved in the field have also adjusted to it. And I guess we all know better now how to deal with such situations. Naturally, a completely new situation arising suddenly is going to cause a substantial setback to the education of children. Now, of course, one hears of children sitting in Guwahati and, because the parents were originally in Delhi or Gurgaon, children sitting in Guwahati receiving education, which is great. It's not ideal in relation to the physical modes of education that we have been used to over the years, but it's I think the challenge is being addressed, and that's something that should be appreciated.
Right, sir. So, Dr. Rai and Dr. Krishnan, sir, again a concluding thought from your side as to where do you think that more sync is needed from corporates and government and the government authorities in terms of creating a long-lasting solution of kind of hybrid model that is evolving over the last 1.5 years in education sector? Where do you see the challenges, and what is the scope of improvement towards that? Or do you think that offline is again going to come back in full swing?
I'll start. I think, Somesh, our students, particularly in our long duration programs like full-time MBA and so on, as I mentioned earlier, they really value the overall experience they get. It's not only about what they learn in the classroom. So I think many of those programs, they're already slowly shifting back to the original model. Of course, whatever we have experienced during the pandemic will have some impact. We will use technology perhaps better in the future. Faculty are now more conversant with the online methods of teaching. We will do more blended learning perhaps, but I don't think we are going to shift at least the regular programs to an exclusively online mode. It doesn't make sense, and it will be counterproductive in my view. However, what will happen is that there are new audiences, maybe new markets which have opened up thanks to the pandemic. For example, there are a lot of people who are retooling themselves to deal with the changes that are happening in the workplace. And there are significant opportunities to address there in terms of training those people. And a lot of those need to be cost effective as well. So we will use online and other methods to reach out to those audiences. For example, here in IMB, we are looking at addressing the hospital sector. We are looking at the micro, small and medium enterprise sector. We're looking at several sectors which are kind of in a way suffering because of COVID, as also because of the kind of underserved nature of these sectors in terms of training and education. So we will focus on those sectors going forward, and whatever support the corporate sector can provide to us in terms of technology, in terms of partnerships, in terms of resources in helping us reach these larger audiences, that would be most welcome.
Yeah, so I'll just add on to what Rishi said. And Somesh, I see three challenges. I'll very quickly talk about them. The first challenge that I see coming to us is that the business schools and higher education institutions have to respond to the effects of the pandemic in a slightly more collaborative way. What do I mean by this? Instead of accepting what the industry has said, for example, making a statement and saying now education is going to be online and completely discounting offline or physical classroom education is not going to happen. Like what Rishi pointed out, there's several other elements, several other benefits that come in terms of people coming together. Likewise, when, for example, one of the corporates made an announcement saying that for some of their job profiles, they're going to actually implement work from home for life. And immediately some of the institutions around the world jumped into the thing saying that, okay, now how can we facilitate that? And in India, I was talking to, but not in India, I was talking to a bunch of deans, a group of deans from across the world. And I said, hey, hang on. Instead of trying to say that, okay, how can we facilitate this? I think we should engage in a debate and a conversation with the corporate saying, is it even desirable to have work from home for life? Do you see the social cost that one will have to pay the moment you eliminate that boundary between the work life and between the personal life? There's a huge social cost. You can see that the number of disagreements, the number of conflicts within the houses, the number of divorces, the number of separations, the amount of domestic violence, which has gone up during this pandemic time because of people staying and not going really out. Now, all of that needs to be factored in, and therefore we need to come together and collaborate. So that is the first challenge that we need to address. The second challenge that we need to address is the last mile. As I said, we shifted within a week, but did my education reach the person who was sitting in the Northeast? Did my education reach the person who was sitting in Jammu and Kashmir and did not have 4G, let alone a good internet connection? Did my education reach a home in Mumbai where there were 5 people sharing the same room, working and educating, trying to educate themselves? So that particular challenge still needs to be addressed. And the third thing, I think there were certain after effects, certain impacts which are going to be very long lasting. And should corporates, institutions such as ours and government not come together and look at it? I'll tell you only about one, and those are questions of ethics. We are talking about online education and not talking merely about online higher education, but I'm talking about online education of school children, where I've seen parents having a conversation where they were actually trying to impress the other parents, saying as to how did they manage to help their children cheat. Now, is this what we are really looking at? Did we actually consider this particular issue, that online education and therefore online assessment as a consequence has led to, it's brought out the best in many, many people, but it's also brought out the worst in some of us. And one of those are these ethical considerations. And I think these are the 3 challenges that we need to be looking at very, very seriously.
Right, Dr. Rai, I think you made some very good points and a very balanced approach, I would say. I think what basically we would all agree is to pick up the best of both, online and offline, to have like a very nice balanced model. So I would conclude by thanking you all for such a thought-provoking session and for sharing these wonderful insights. I think we all would agree that COVID may or may not stay, but advanced ways of learning and teaching, particularly hybrid models, are here to stay. So on that note, thank you very much for joining us today. Over to you, Ruchika.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, esteemed speakers, for that very important and enriching presentation and discussion. I wish that more people from across sectors would now be inspired and will try to see all the sides of the issues and challenges at hand and find suitable solutions for a better future in this particular area of education. So I would also like to extend my thanks to Medha for her time and support. Thank you all. And